At Vermont Daily Chronicle, we support your First Amendment right.
And we also support your Second Amendment rights.
Chocolate vanilla twist with rainbow sprinkles. Come on down.
Well, welcome to the Vermont Podcast. I'm Guy Page, editor of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, and I'm here with our social media director, Paul Bean, at the controls, managing editor Tim Page, off camera over here, and our special guest, Rob Roper. Rob.
Hey, Guy. How you doing? Good to be back.
Great to have you back, Rob.
Well, thank you.
So, as usual, Rob, we thought we had this edition nailed. We knew exactly what the lead story was going to be. Boy, it was all about the most important thing going on in the state of Vermont, which is the resolution of the bill about our property taxes, how much we're going to be paying in property taxes the next 3, 4, 5 years. That turned out to not be the biggest story because I'm driving along, actually either coming or going from the funeral. If I look like I'm dressed for a funeral, well, yes, because that's where I was this morning. And I get this call from Paul, and he says, "Hey, Guy, big story." I said, "Oh, here we go again. What is it?" And he says, "Homeland Security just declared Vermont a sanctuary jurisdiction." Oh, yep, that's going to be the lead story, not the murders that are happening in Vermont and the drug dealing and basically everyone getting a slap in the wrist. We had 3 stories in the Chronicle today that are basically all about people doing awful, terrible things and not a whole lot of consequences happening. So you might want to check out the Vermont Daily Chronicle on that. We're here at 82 Scoop Studios in Barrie. Thank you very much, Raylene Meunier and everyone else who puts together this studio. But first, Paul, would you please fill us in on the nuts and bolts of what Homeland Security, the bomb they dropped today?
Well, they cited a number of states, 15 states to be clear, including Vermont, Massachusetts, California, and New York as a whole, sanctuary states, basically, where we've basically made it somewhat legal, I guess, to harbor illegal immigrants and illegal people that are here, and technically should not be, at least by the standards of the federal government. So yeah, actually last night it was like maybe 6:48 last night. DHS posted that graphic to their social media on X. And I was like, I didn't see it.
You were the first one to pick it up.
I was the first one to pick it up. Wow. I didn't see it until
Okay.
So I was like, wow, okay. Nobody realized this. I guess I get a scoop here, And it's funny because I was talking with Calvin Cutler, WCAX, yesterday or 2 days ago, and we were just talking about how exciting it is to get a really good scoop. And I was like, Calvin, I get most of the best scoops from Twitter, and X. And he's like, oh, I could see how that might happen, and it happens all the time. But so basically, I had somebody tag me in it, and they said, hey, have you seen this? And I'm reading it, and I'm like, I can't believe nobody else has reported on this. I can't believe I'm the first person. So I had this whole plan for what I was about to go do for a couple hours, but then I was like, well, there goes that plan. I got to write this story because it's too important. So we wrote it. It sounds like Vermont could be at risk of losing federal funding. Montpelier, Burlington, and Winooski were all
sanctuary cities.
Yep, all sanctuary cities. They were all cited as well. And they also said something along the lines of, we're going to hold politicians accountable for this. And I wonder what that means. I can't imagine, mass arrests or anything like that, but I could imagine cuts in spending from the federal government to sanctuary cities and states. I mean, we're already seeing that all the time. Again, people have wondered how much has like the whole Doge thing really worked out, and how much is Vermont actually losing in federal spending. It appears all the time we hear something new. I just heard of the tech hub up in Burlington that they were going to build. It was the UVM tech hub. That got cut. They're not going to be building that anymore. I don't know if you guys heard about that. But that was kind of an interesting story too. So point is, they're not messing around here, and they're naming names, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen throughout the summer. That's basically it, Guy, on that.
Now, if it is a big funding cut, the legislature has kind of been planning for this, and they realize that if it reaches a certain point, I think it's 4% of their gross spending or something like that, they will have to come back in August or maybe September to kind of revisit the whole budget and say, oh, okay, first of all, what can we cut? And also, this rainy day money we have sort of set aside, how can we kind of slide it over and fund it?
And that's the other thing. It's like, again, we're going to talk all about education funding today, and we're going to talk about the restructuring, how that's going to work. But how much will that really matter? Let's say if Vermont loses a good chunk of funding, if we're not able to pull money from here for different programs, then how will that affect the school system? So, this is why amongst many reasons, why this story is our lead story for the day. And I do just have this pulled up here. I just want to read it real quick to everybody so that they have an idea of what this is on the Chronicle. And this is a screenshot of Homeland Security's post on X. And it said, today, DHS issued a comprehensive list of sanctuary jurisdictions that are deliberately obstructing the enforcement of federal immigration laws and endangering American citizens. We are exposing these sanctuary politicians who harbor criminal, illegal aliens and defy federal law. President Trump and Secretary Nunn will always put the safety of the American people first. Sanctuary politicians are on notice. Comply with federal law. So,
Paul,
see what comes out of it.
If people want to comment on this, how do they do that?
Yeah, if you're out there watching on X or on Facebook or YouTube, just like you'd comment on anything else, I know Chronicle readers know how to comment. A lot of you do, but if you don't, there should be a little bar down below that says comment. And if you have some thoughts or you have a reaction or you have something you want to say about what we're talking about today, please feel free to participate. Or if you notice anything wrong, if you don't like something, we're open to criticism. We can handle it. So please let us know. And seriously, though, about sound, light, anything. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Of course.
So we're going to shift over to what was originally our huge story, which was what is the legislature doing or not doing, and what is the governor doing or not doing to get our property taxes back to something like a decent level. Because Paul and I were sitting here, I know I say this often, but Rob, we were sitting right here last November on election night watching one Senate seat after another, one House seat after another go from blue to red to blue to red. And at 1 a.m, Paul and I are looking at each other, dead tired, and I said, Paul, we're a purple state now. And the number one reason, I think, I'd welcome your feedback on this, was the sticker shock over property taxes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It was property taxes and the sticker shock over the clean heat standard were sort of the combination that I think really gave Republicans a clear campaign message to run on, and put the Democrats in a situation where they had a very clear voting record that people were opposed to. So what I hope is that Republicans don't get sucked into a situation this year where they go along to get along with some of these proposals that do not reduce our property taxes. The clean heat standard is sort of in this weird limbo now. Republicans, Terry Williams, senator from Rutland, actually tried to get a repeal vote pulled out of his committee and onto the floor for a vote, which he didn't get, but he got a roll call vote on the procedural thing, which is telling. It was 17-13, pure party line vote on that.
Pure party line.
Yeah, so there is some accountability there, but I'm worried with the property tax issue is very early on, and even in 2024, before the election, This whole issue started back in December 2023 when the Craig Bolio, the then tax commissioner, came out with his report, said, hey, we're looking at an 18% property tax increase based on where we see spending going. You guys better do something. And the legislature didn't do nothing, and then they said, oh, this is just hype, it's scare tactics by the Scott administration, it's never as high as everybody says it was, and then it turns out, oh, it's actually higher than the 18% we said. It's actually looking more like 20%, and that was about midway through the session. So then they scrambled, and they put together this commission on the future of public education in Vermont, which is where it ended up at the end of the 2024 legislative session. And the original debate for about 48 hours was how are we going to reduce property taxes? And then what my good friend John McClowery terms the blob, which is the teachers union, the superintendents association, the principals association, the school boards association, and the business managers association for the public school system. They circled the wagons. They went ballistic, said, you're not cutting anything. Absolutely not. And they got the legislature to change the conversation from how are we going to reduce property taxes to this much broader concept of how we're going to reimagine education for the future. Well, the way they reimagine education for the future is with more money for them, more centralized power for them, less, and the rest of us are kind of out in the cold. And that has carried through. Even they sent them out with, come up with a plan for, January 2025 this year. But they didn't do anything because, as far as they're concerned, everything's hunky-dory. They're getting tons of money. They're not accountable for school student numbers tanking, which they have been. They like it the way it is. And if it's going to change, it's going to change in a way that makes those things they like more so. And that is really where we are right now. Now, I know it's changed. It's very fluid, and we're going to get something later today, hopefully, that's different from what I'm describing. But that's where it is right now.
Yeah. Tim, could you please go on the legislative website, look up committees of conference, and find the one for the school funding and see if there's any news on that, if anything has happened from that. Yeah. Because this is, when I talked to one of the members this morning at 10:30, he said, oh, we're listening to the governor. The governor he's got some ways to bring expenses down here, to make it happen quicker, and we're listening, and we think we're going to get there. Now, is that sort of splitting the baby, and it's really still going to raise our taxes?
Well,
I don't know.
I know, because they've already passed the yield bill, and the yield bill includes a 1.1% property tax increase.
That's true.
So for the next bill you're going to get, it's going to be a property tax increase. And frankly,
this August or whatever.
Frankly, legislators, that was not the mission that the voters sent you on when they went to the polls last November. They sent you out there to reduce their property tax burden, not increase it just a little bit instead of a lot of bit, not maybe bend the cost curve 3-5 years down the road. They sent you out there to reduce property taxes. And I got to tell you, since before COVID, we're spending something like $1 billion more on education in just like the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. The COVID emergency is gone.
The money is gone.
Well, the federal money for it's gone, but the emergency is gone, and the things that we're supposed to be spending the money on are no longer emergencies. Right. So, to my thinking, there's no reason why we shouldn't be trying to go back to a pre-COVID spending level with property tax cuts that result from that. And yeah, inflation between 2019 and 2025 would be higher than that amount. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to have that sort of a cost trajectory going on.
Yeah. Anything, Tim?
It is scheduled for today.
Okay. So as far as you can tell, they're still talking.
Last updated 2 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're still talking.
I was wondering, Rob, you say it was about reducing the property tax burden, and I just want to be very clear. It's like, we had a 20% increase. It's not about keeping it at the same level. Like, Vermonters literally want relief from this, right?
Yeah, what voters said in 2024 was, we cannot afford the 14% property tax increase that you just slapped us with. Get rid of that.
Yeah.
Stop that from happening. Not bake that into the cake. So we're paying that forever, and maybe just a little bit more instead of a lot more moving forward. I think that was the mission that was given to this new legislature when they showed up in 2025, and it hasn't really been the focus. The focus has been, well, let's change the number of school districts we have. Let's change the number of supervisory unions we have. Let's go after the independent schools and the tuitioning system. All of these things, and I understand that in order to put in some tax cuts, maybe you have to compromise on some of these things, but they should be the means to that end. If you end up sacrificing your ability to vote for your local school board, if you end up sacrificing your ability to vote on how much you're going to pay for education, because now that's a state level thing, if you're going to sacrifice your, if you're in a tuitioning town, your ability to choose your child's school, and maybe that school gets shut down because it no longer has tuition, so it's not even a choice for you anymore, even if you can pay for it, I think people might be willing to accept some of those sacrifices if it is a means to lower property taxes. But if you get all that unattractive stuff plus a 1.1% property tax increase, I mean, I'd be upset.
Yeah.
and I will be upset.
That's what I'm saying. Is like maybe the just just thinking about it, the point going forward for a lot of Republicans needs to be, we didn't get the relief, or at least not now anyway. At this moment, if we come out of the session and he, they do come up with some kind of compromise, I don't know what that looks like, but maybe you do. I'm not sure at this point. Right?
I don't think they get to any compromise where you're going to see a lower property tax bill anywhere in the near future.
Really?
No. I think that, even the governor, and not his last press conference, but I think the one before was, or maybe it was an interview on a radio program, he was talking about a bending of the cost curve. A bending of the cost curve does not mean a cut. It means slower rates of increase. People can't afford it.
Yeah.
And, the cynic in me says, what they're hoping for is that the people who can't afford it are going to leave. If you put a 4-year time horizon on this, and it's 2029, which is what the House version kicks in, where they start really implementing some of these changes, in that 4 years, the people who can't afford their property taxes are going to leave.
That's right.
And they're going to be, they're already leaving.
Yeah.
And, get rid of all of them, and you'll replace them with people who can afford that property tax level, and you'll milk those people until they scream bloody murder, and then you'll put together another 4-year package, at which point they'll leave and get replaced by people who can afford the property taxes, which is why you see Vermont becoming this haven for the rich, where it's, it's what I call a country club economic model, where you have people who are very well off, who have funny money and can afford the 5-figure property tax bill as their dues to be in the club, and you have the staff who are, working, who are, paid by the government to continue to live here, and anybody who's in that middle class is, out in the cold.
Part of the problem with that model, Rob, I was talking to someone from Greensboro, and Greensboro is a famously sort of an elite enclave of former Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist had a home there, and a lot of other very wealthy people from away. Someone had this idea of, hey, we could build some affordable housing here in Greensboro. And the money actually wasn't a problem. There was state money, federal money, I don't know. The problem was that the locals, i.e. the wealthy elite, said, no, we don't want any affordable housing in our town, because that would, wink, wink, change the character of the town. But the problem with that is, okay, Mr. Greensboro elite, who's going to mow your lawn? I mean, there's this idea that as long as we have enough people around to mow our lawns and fix our sinks, but we're getting to the point where we don't even have those anymore.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
certainly can't live in Greensboro.
Just
Oh,
to make a point, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, Rob, but I mean, maybe the illegal immigrants will be the people doing that work.
Oh, I think we're doing something about them too, though.
Yeah, I'm just
Not
saying,
anymore.
you know,
Yeah.
it's-
But yeah, no, we have a labor shortage. We have a population problem where we have an aging society, and the middle class is being hollowed out. It's hard to find, plumbers, carpenters, electricians, the people that you need to build the housing in order for more plumbers, electricians, to come move here. And you look at the states that are seeing population growth. You look at the states that are seeing that kind of economic growth that Vermonters say we want. And it's not states that are adopting the policies that Vermont is adopting. It's North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, Florida, Tennessee. Those are the states that are seeing the kind of population growth and economic opportunities that we say we want, but we don't want to do the things that get you there.
well, we want it how we want it, right? Like if it's going to be a green, beautiful, utopian society, then we can talk all about these great ideas. But nobody wants to actually do the hard things to make that happen. And I don't mean we want to make that happen necessarily, but they want to create maybe an economic model which is again, like you mentioned, the country club. It's not real opportunity. It's
So
very
Paul, before we go to our first break, do we have any comments?
Yes, we do. We have, here's a comment from Libby Moyer. She says, what is the amount of money Vermont receives annually from the federal government in direct benefits for food, housing, transportation, education, health, Medicare, Medicaid for illegal immigrants? I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe one of you guys do.
No, I don't.
I don't. Maybe try asking Grok that question. Grok sometimes gives pretty good responses to that kind of stuff, or at least gives you threads to dive into. We also have a comment from Maureen Heck. She says, Global Warming Solutions Act and Clean Heat Standards repeal, property taxes, reduce education, bureaucracy, and budget, and housing crisis was the 3 mandate from Vermont voters. And we are going to talk a little bit actually about the Clean Heat Standard, but while we're at it, this is a perfect time for an ad. Today's episode is brought to you by Procter Gas, the propane people. Are you a homeowner wishing to convert your home to propane gas so you can enjoy energy efficiency living and off-grid? Alternatively, you may be a contractor seeking propane and line installation related services for your clients. Either way, our propane company is here to help. Procter Gas provides comprehensive services and a variety of products from leading brands in Rutland and beyond. So again, shout out to Procter Gas. I got my hat today. Oh, it looks like Guy just threw his on.
Yep.
He got up. He just left the studio to grab his hat.
He figures, well, Paul's talking. I don't need to be here.
Well, I know we.
Hey, speaking of what we're wearing, you've got a Vermont Yak company.
I do.
What's that all about?
Yeah, Vermont Yak Co. I'm serving yak burgers and sausages over in Northfield.
And sausages too?
And sausages as
I didn't
well.
know that.
For anyone who is unfamiliar with a yak, I mean, I guess I could probably pull one up real quick, but
It's
it's
Tim,
very-
isn't that the name of a Russian fighter plane, the Yak?
Is it really?
Yes, it is.
Just for anyone who's curious, I'm just pulling it up on the screen share real quick. This is what a yak looks like, just so you know, guys. Everybody's like, what is that? That sounds disgusting, because, yak, right? But it's just kind of like a cow, a little bit different, leaner meat, a little bit leaner, less fat. And I also serve regular burgers. I got regular grass-fed beef burgers. I have hot dogs, and of course, creamies. I got some for everybody. And glass bottle Cokes. So come on down. Come say hello.
What's the closest meat that you can compare yak to?
Bison or buffalo, a buffalo.
Of course, for everyone who's had a buffalo burger, we know exactly what you're talking about. But
And they're good.
They are good, yeah. They're really good. I keep telling everybody that is like super, like if you really have reservations about it, I ask people, well, have you ever eaten venison? And they say, oh, yeah. And I say, it's like a mix between venison and a cow.
Oh.
And people are like, oh, I eat
Dang.
both those. So that's probably the best way to describe it. But, people, I've had good feedback. What I'll say is when you eat a burger, sometimes you feel like, kind of like a little full and maybe a little logy.
yeah.
Not the yak burger. The yak burger will leave you feeling energized. It's more like digests like salmon. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
When are you open?
I'm open, I'll be open tonight at 4:30. So and I'm all weekend from 12 to 9, and not open Monday, but weekdays I'm open Tuesday through Friday, 4:30 to 9 p.m.
So we could come down for a late lunch tomorrow.
Come on down for a late lunch. I'll be there. I'll be there all afternoon, hanging out and slinging the yak.
Pretty cool. And where are you located? Just for those who don't know.
I'm 470 North Main Street, Northfield, Vermont. The former Bean Chevrolet building, if you know that, or right next to Convenience Plus. So
Right.
yeah, come on down.
Okay, great. So
we have a clip we want to show.
we do.
Do you want to
Go
go to
ahead.
that now? Or
Yeah,
do you wanna...
sure, do it now.
So here's a clip of Governor Scott yesterday at his press conference, just talking a little bit about the education reform.
Since then, I've been clear. We can't keep doing what we're doing and expecting different results, because it's not helping our kids or doing right by taxpayers. And I know many lawmakers in the building feel the same way. We've had constructive conversations with legislators and leadership throughout the session, and there is agreement. We need bold education transformation this session, rather than kicking the can further down the road.
So Rob, the governor seems to want a compromise so they can all leave the session. Everyone's got something. Maybe it's not perfect for everyone. Is that a good idea?
If it doesn't reduce property taxes, it's not a good idea. At least it's not a good idea that I think Republicans should sign on to and vote for this.
Why?
Well, again, because I see what's going to happen is this year, the only reason we're at a 1.1% property tax increase is because they used $77 million worth of surplus in the education fund, and I think somewhere $40 million worth of general fund surplus. Or maybe you have that reversed. Maybe it was
I think
one
that,
was general fund and one was,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's about $130 million of non-property tax revenue to buy down the property tax. So, you know, if they didn't have that, it would actually be about a 6% increase that we'd be looking at on top of the 14% increase that we had last time.
Right.
So 20% over the 2 years. Now next year, if they don't change things radically and spending, the spending, because this is driven by spending.
Yeah.
If they don't do something to cut the education spending, we could be looking at a 20% property tax increase, because you'll get the 6% spending increase that we had this year, or the 6% property tax increase based on spending for this year. You're going to get another increase for next year with no money to buy down that delta.
Yep.
You're looking at, you know, it could be 15, 20, I've heard some people say it could be a 20% property tax increase going into the that you get in July, August before the 2026 election. If Republicans have signed on to the bill that leads to that, they are going to get demolished in 2026.
So they will be complicit.
They will be complicit in the property tax increase. You know, what they were able to say going into 2024 was, we voted against the property tax increase. The governor vetoed it. We voted against it. We were calling for reform, and the Democrats didn't listen to us. We had nothing to do with it. If in 2026 they can't say that exact same thing, what happened to the Democrats this last election is going to happen to them in 2026.
Wow. Well, that's a concerning prophecy we just heard there. Yeah. Okay. Well, Paul, any comments on that?
Yeah, I got some comments. Well, I have a comment here from Maureen Heck. She says they hired a consulting firm, Colorado, for this school redesign and didn't publish estimated cost savings. That was the entire purpose of the exercise. And that's, I didn't know that. That's pretty concerning.
Well, the governor's plan that he put forward claimed about $180 million worth of savings, but Maureen's right. They never really put that into a spreadsheet or anything. Said, okay, we're going to save money here, 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 and here.
Yep.
It was sort of a number.
So I have a comment from Tim Page, who's in the room with us. He says, oddly enough, it appears that the H454 Committee of Conference is not being live streamed. However,
I was able to find most of it.
Oh, okay. So maybe it was
Not
just
current block, I couldn't find that. However, the first block of the discussion, I linked in a later comment.
Okay, so that's the transcript coverage
Yeah.
of the conversation, which probably is linked to the live stream. So, I read that though, and it kind of made me think yesterday, right before the governor's chief of staff, Jason Malucci, was supposed to give testimony in that conference committee. Of course, a fire alarm goes off
Right.
in the State House. Everybody had to evacuate. It's like, what is going on here,
Yeah.
But I can't help it, but I just have to wonder sometimes when stuff like that happens.
Sure.
We also have a comment here from, where did it go? David Kurtsetter. He says, all I hear from my town meeting for the increase is from the cost of health care. Why is the percentage truly from the health care costs? Is that true, basically?
There's no doubt healthcare costs. There was a press conference that the Democrats held yesterday where they said the healthcare cost crisis is part of the school crisis. And in a way, they're right. Because if our premiums are going up 20, 25% for healthcare, and they are, well, yeah, that's going to affect your school costs. So the legislature has done three things. The first thing they did was they put a cap on outpatient drugs, which is if you need to get an infusion, you go in and you sit in for, or like dialysis or something, you go in, you get the infusion, and then you leave. They put a cap on that. They also said that all hospital services, between an aspirin and an MRI, there will be what's called reference-based pricing, which is this is what it costs. In every hospital, it's going to cost 80 cents for a tablet of Tylenol or whatever it costs. And it's not going to be $4 in one hospital and a quarter in another. So that, they hope, is going to keep the cost down. The hospitals are screaming about that, saying we're already 9 out of 15 are in the red. And you're basically making it so we can't collect as much money for all these things. How's that going to work? And they're saying, well, you better make it work. So they're really trying, and the really scary bill is one that has been passed and signed, and it's essentially the break in case of fire bill that says that if Blue Cross Blue Shield are one remaining private insurer, if they go belly up, if they go bankrupt, here's a process by which we can at least keep them on life support. So they passed a bill this year, and the governor signed it, knowing that something like that was very possible. So our one big insurer, they could go belly up. So healthcare is, and it's all because of what you alluded to, Rob, which is we're an aging population.
Yeah.
I can tell you, for people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, the healthcare costs just start climbing. Colette and I have both been, real consumers of the healthcare system where we weren't for 10 or 20 years. And it's just, that's how it goes. And the rest of the states like that too, which is one of the reasons why I'm really a big believer in Make America Healthy Again.
Me too.
Because that's when we are taking responsibility for our own health. Instead of saying, well, I eat junk, I drink a lot, I never move my body, I feel lousy, I'm going to go to the ER and someone's going to give me a pill. Could you get anything more likely just to cause an out-of-control healthcare system than that? And yet that's the MO
where
in
we're
our
at.
society. Yeah.
That's the MO, but I'll point out that it's worse in Vermont than any other state. We have the highest health insurance premiums of any state in the country.
Why?
And this is what gets me about, the Democrats in the legislature are saying, the reason that our education system's screwed up is because our health insurance system is screwed up. Well, who screwed up the health insurance system? Right. It's been the healthcare as a human right people who have been in charge in the legislature for 20 years at least.
Yep.
And they've been pushing, basically healthcare for all and policies to get to healthcare for all for all of that time, we had Peter Shumlin's single-payer health care, we had Catamount Health, we had all of these regulations that they placed. They've got the Green Mountain Care Board that runs everything, and it's a disaster. P.J. O'Rourke said it best. He said, if you think health care is expensive now, wait till you see what it costs when it's free. And that's what we got in Vermont with health care policy. We got a bunch of people who said health care should be free, and they have made it the most expensive in the country. With, as you said, like 9 out of our 14 hospitals in the red, and our only remaining major insurance provider on the brink of bankruptcy.
Right.
That's what they got. And so they've screwed up both.
Yep. And the one is hurting the other.
And one is.
I'm sorry. I just want to add. It's like you said. It's who screwed up the healthcare system. Well, it's like, well, many legislators that did that are no longer in the legislature. So like you just have this group of people that have inherited this problem that they don't even really have the full context of how they got there in the first place. If I'm not mistaken, is that?
Well, there's some continuity. Senate Health and Welfare Chair Ginny Lyons, I think, would.
Yeah, she's been there for the whole
Right.
shooting match,
Right.
as they say.
Yeah.
Here's a comment from Losang Ludwig. He writes, total cumulative inflation since 2019 is 24%. So that also plays into this, not to mention that Vermont itself kind of has its own hyperinflation, or I don't know how, localized inflation, I guess is probably the right word. You know, we have our own problem. You know, we just talked about one of those things being, you can't get somebody to work on your home. You can't get somebody to come fix this problem, or even your car. You know, so all those things have become more expensive. So Vermont is actually in, it's like a downward spiral. Everything's spiraling into this very, very negative direction because of all the things that we're talking about. I also have a comment here from Jerry Zeller, and it kind of goes back to what Rob was saying a while back. The cycle you mentioned, talking about how we're in this position now where it's like all these new people that can come move in here, and we're, if you have the funny money to do it, if you're wealthy enough to do it. And he writes, the cycle. It used to be farmers, now they are gone. Now it's out-of-staters retired. Next, it will be the towns owning the properties, buildings, and housing. So I don't know if I don't like to picture that, but that's certainly something I could imagine in the long haul of it. By the time I'm a bit older, what will that look like? If this spiral, if this cycle continues.
Right. It looks like people moving to Tennessee.
Well,
Yeah.
The committee conference is live now.
Okay, that's
Okay.
an update from Tim. The committee conference is live now, so there's no funny business going on as far as we can tell.
So my understanding is that once they pass that, if they pass that, that will then go to the full House, full Senate, and between that bill and the housing bill, that's another huge one. They're probably going to be there until late in the night tonight, possibly into this morning. They could be there to 1 or 2 in the morning, where they hope, crossing their fingers, they hope to adjourn. And with the governor's blessing, they hope to adjourn. Because if they don't have it, he has said he'll call them back. So, we'll see how that goes. And we'll be trying to keep you posted of that at least on our Vermont Daily Chronicle Facebook page.
And with that, today's episode is brought to you by Ranmar Corporation. Yes. Randy Rulo, Ranmar Corporation. Ranmar Corporation has been serving central Vermont and surrounding areas with excavation, construction, and real estate services since 1979. They are a local, family-owned company committed to the values of Vermont. Contact Ranmar Corporation today for all of your contracting and real estate needs. And oh my goodness, Guy left us. We're stranded here, Rob. He's had enough of us. He's had enough of us in the show today.
Actually, I'm dry. Can you tell?
He needs some water.
Yeah, yes.
Sometimes that happens.
Driven him to drink.
Well, with that,
You have no idea.
Rob was driven to drink. I have a couple comments here we ought to read. Stephen Nichols writes, the lottery revenue was supposed to be a large chunk of education spending, but nobody can answer the question of where all this money goes. I do believe it goes into the pot, but I don't believe it's nearly enough of what's needed. Rob, can you answer that question?
Well, it does go into the pot, and this is, again, why my friend John McClary calls it the blob, because we pay for it with property taxes, but it also 100% of the sales tax has been gobbled up.
Right.
And I remember at the beginning of the session, Scott Beck, who's now leading the conference committee there, pointed out giving the education fund the sales tax was supposed to relieve property taxes. It didn't.
No.
They just used it and spent it.
Right.
And continued the path. So then you've got a portion of the rooms and meals tax that goes to it, a portion of the sales and use tax that goes in.
Let's not forget the cloud tax.
Nope. And last session they passed
Yeah.
a $20 million cloud tax, a tax on internet-based services.
And an Airbnb.
And they put out a 3% surcharge on short-term rentals.
Right.
All to go in. So, I mean, it subsumes everything in its path, and
I
it gets
can't
bigger and
believe
bigger and bigger.
I can't believe that, all those things you just named, and we still ended up with the 12% property tax increase, or 14%.
Yeah, that was the
there.
buy down. That they used the cloud tax and the Airbnb tax, and I think some surplus money to buy it down from 20%
yeah.
to 14%.
Got it. So we're
So-
all paying for it in some way or another.
To segue into our energy policy segment here, where I hope Rob will be holding forth, I did find out one sort of encouraging thing that actually is sort of a tax increase, and you wouldn't think those two go together, but maybe they do. For years, they've been trying to figure out, okay, EVs, why aren't they paying their fair share of taking care of our roads? You know, a road tax. Well, what I heard from the chair of House Transportation, Matt Walker. What I heard is that January 1 of 2027, finally, EVs will be paying pretty much the same as gas-powered vehicles are paying for care of Vermont's road and bridges.
So it's going to go to roads and bridges, because right now
Yes.
they pay a fee, but it doesn't go for roads and
It goes
bridges.
to charging
it goes
stations.
to charging stations.
Yeah, I just thought that was hilarious in a bad way when I heard that. But no, this will be going.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That is good news.
Yeah, and it's only about time, you know, that happened. So the clean heat standard. I got a letter someone sent me a letter from House Energy Chair Kathleen James saying the clean heat standard cannot go forward without an affirmative vote of the legislature. And so the Public Utilities Commission has said, so the clean heat standard is dead. Is that good news? Or is that even true? What do you think, Rob?
It's not dead.
Actually, no, I'm going to back up here. I'm going to say, this is the guy, everyone, in case you didn't know, and you probably do, who has done a better job of following Vermont's climate legislation for the last 10 or 15 years, both as a columnist and as president of the Ethan Allen Institute. So no one knows more about the ins and outs and the historical context of Vermont's climate legislation than this guy, than Rob Roper. Rob, with that, okay, sorry.
Well, thanks for saying that. I'd say Annette Smith and Alan Dispathy are up there with me, but
Yeah, that's true.
But,
and how do people read your column?
they can read me on Substack. It's robertroper.substack.com is the URL, and the name of my column is Behind the Lines, Rob Roper on Vermont Politics. And I wrote about this today in hat tip to the Daily Chronicle, because this is where I saw that memo that came from the PUC, and I thought it was hysterical, because the clean heat standard is not dead; it is dormant. It is like a vampire in its coffin, waiting for night to come out and suck the blood out of your wallet at the next opportunity that it gets. And what they passed the law in 2023, and it's law.
Right.
And elements of that law were immediately put into place, and one of them was establishing a fuel dealer registry. That's the law. Now, there was an element of it where they are creating this carbon credit exchange, where you create carbon credits and buy and sell carbon credits. The PUC was supposed to spend 1.5 years putting together the rules for how that exchange was going to work. Mm-hmm. And the check back that they put in for the law was, okay, when those rules are written, the legislature has to come back, read the rules, and vote to approve them or not. But it's still law. It's still law that we have a clean heat standard. Right. It's still law that we're supposed to have the registry. But so what happened is the PUC took this 18 months, and they're looking at this, how are we going to do this exchange? And they said, this is not right for Vermont. Do not do this. It's going to be way too expensive. It's going to be way too complicated. It's really regressive. It's ripe for fraud. And it's just a really bad idea. So don't do the exchange. And that's when Republicans say, okay, well, let's repeal this law because we don't have this on the books if we're not doing this. Well, this year, and a big part of the big wave, that red wave that we saw in 2024 was property taxes and this bill because it was going to lead to, as much as, $1, $4 were some of the estimates, per an additional, on top of your per gallon cost of propane, natural gas, diesel fuel, and fuel oil. So basically, the Democrats don't have the votes to override a veto if they were to push this forward. So they have just kind of sat on it. And they won't let the Republicans bring up a vote to repeal it. They put in several bills to do so. As I said earlier in the program, Terry Williams, senator from Rutland, actually tried to pull the parliamentary maneuver to relieve his committee of the bill and bring it to the floor for a vote in the Senate. The Democrats killed that on procedural grounds. So they want the vampire to remain in the coffin. But the funny thing about this story that you guys broke with that memo from the PUC is the PUC is saying that they pointed out a number of problems with the parts of the bill or parts of the law that they're supposed to be executing, particularly this fuel dealer registry. And so what they said in that memo to Kathleen James et al. Is, yeah, we're supposed to be doing this registry. We're not doing it. If you guys aren't going to, grow a pair and pass the law, there's no reason for us to go forward with this fuel dealer registry. So we're not going to collect the data. We're not going to enforce it if the fuel dealers don't do this. It was big. Really, it was a sort of a to the legislature. It's like, you guys have totally screwed this thing up. Yeah. And I don't know how the legislature is going to react to that because it is in the law that they're supposed to do the registry. But it was so messed up, and Matt Kodas pointed this out a bunch of times. The way that they wrote the law was if you live on the border, say, and you got a gas grill in your backyard, you go over to Home Depot in Lebanon, get your Rhino tank filled, and bring it back to Vermont, you're a fuel importer. And you have to, technically, according to law, you have to register and buy a credit in order to bring that propane back into the state. Now, that wasn't the intent of the law, but that's the way the law is written. Right. And so earlier in the session, the PUC, Ed McNamara, who heads up the Public Utilities Commission, came in and said, these are problems with this registry. You got to fix these things. And the Democrats didn't. They didn't. And I'll tell you the reason why they didn't do it, because if they had fixed the problems with the fuel dealer registry part of Act 18, that would have had to go on the floor, and you would have had a germane amendment to repeal the clean heat standard. And the Democrats would have had to have voted for or against that repeal amendment.
And that's what they are running from.
They are running from it. So that's why I think they're just going to not pay attention to the fact that the PUC is going to do this. But, and this is why it's good news, if they do try to bring it back in 2026, if there's no fuel dealer registry being enforced, it's going to make it very difficult for them to revitalize this thing. When the vampire comes out of the cage, it might have fewer teeth, or it might be more complicated.
So what would it take to drive a stake through his heart?
It's going to take another red wave in 2026 to get Republicans control of at least one body and close to parity in the House.
How do we do that, Rob?
Well, for one thing, you don't vote for a property tax increase after the voters sent you there. I think that the Republicans did pretty much as good a job as they could have on trying to repeal the clean heat standard. You had Mark Higley, Jim Harrison, in the House put forward a number of bills to repeal the Clean Heat Standard, to repeal the Global Warming Solutions Act, to repeal the lawsuit provision of the Global Warming Solutions Act. You know, Terry Williams had similar bills in the House. He pulled that great maneuver to get a roll call vote in the Senate that's pertinent to this. You know, I think they did what they could, but they need to remind people more often that, hey, we did everything that we could, and they stopped us. Yes. At every point. And the other thing that I think they need to do is say, look, we tried to lower your property taxes. The other side would not let us do it. And which is, you know, last minute, if you're watching this, you know, while waiting, you know, if you're a legislator, you're watching this while waiting for the conference committee to finish up, you can't go back to your constituents and say, well, you know, we know we said we were going to fix this problem for you, but it is what it is, and maybe we'll bend the cost curve for you 3-4 years down the road. I just don't think that's going to fly. I don't think it's going to fly, and you're going to have a really hard time making that case in 2026.
They were sent to be part of the solution, and now maybe they're becoming part of the problem.
I hope not. I hope not. But I think that's the way it's going to be perceived. And you know, you get under the Golden Dome and there's backslapping. It's a club, and you know, people are telling you. Yeah. So you got to be work together, and you got to. Nobody cares if you work together. People are going to care. You're going to be judged by one thing: what does my property tax bill say when I get that envelope in the mail in July or August of 2026? They're not going to care that you cut some deal that made a bad bill better in the cafeteria. They're not going to care that you work together collegially to pass something. They need a solution to this problem.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rob. I feel like I have a lot of conversations with legislators all the time. People that I really like, and one of them love dearly. You know, a couple of them, they're great, really great people. But I feel like I have conversations with them, and they get sucked into that whole, you know, got to work together. And you, to a certain extent, you do have to work together because you don't want to just be a complete partisan, right? You definitely want to have some ability to shake the other side's hand. But I feel like often I'm talking with people who I thought were really, really solid on certain things. And I'm not trying to call anybody out specifically, but I feel like I'm talking to them, I'm just like, wow, like you're really getting pulled into the whole, the pomp and circumstance, the glamour, I don't know what it exactly is, but the limelight, I don't know. But sometimes I wonder, like, what happened to the principles that got you elected in the first place?
I thought as someone who did a wonderful job of getting along with people, of showing real leadership, never bending on his core principles, was John McClowry when he was in the Senate. And you never had to wonder, oh gosh, is John going to start going, big government on us? No, he never did that. And yet, he was known, respected, liked. We need more John McClowrys out there.
I mean, it's got to be a challenge too to continue. You got to be straight as an arrow. But I feel like people, they get offered, they get promised things, they get offered things, and it's not like you're being offered money. People aren't being bribed necessarily. I mean, maybe not entirely, but it does seem to me that it can be very infatuating. And you lose sight of the reason that you're there, or your core principles. And like, I could see how difficult that would be, but I agree with you a lot, Guy. We need more people that, their heart's open, they're willing to have conversations, but you know where they stand. You have faith in that person. Right. And I think we're missing that a little bit down there sometimes.
How are we doing for comments, Paul?
I have a comment here from Planet Hank. He says,
"Oh, good."
He says, "I hate the word germane." I do too. I don't know why. It's just so gross. I don't know, something about it. It's just
like germs or something.
Maybe you're just like germane. It's like, okay. I don't know. Anyway, he also writes, Vermonters would pay more if the spending was on things that actually make Vermont better. And then he also writes, people like to be liked and they fall for it. And thank you, Planet Hank, who's also doing a podcast out of Brattleboro. You can tune in late night. And I was listening a little bit last night. He's doing some pretty awesome coverage on some real crime.
Is he touching the drug crime and stuff?
Yeah, yeah, big time.
Oh, boy, because the big story out of there, a 25-year-old woman from Hartford, Connecticut, was running a vicious drug gang in Brattleboro. And, shootings, fentanyl dealing, and she got sent away for over 10 years. I think it was either yesterday or the day before.
I have it pulled up on the screen here. Hartford, Connecticut gang member gets 10 years for Brattleboro drug crimes. And look at her. Would you really expect her to be the one that was doing that? I'm kind of shocked. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's sexist of me, I guess. But, well, Planet Hank, my guess is you're probably covering this story, and feel free to comment on that. But we have another comment. Tim, you're commenting on Facebook and on YouTube. He's double timing me over here. What was the last one he says? Tim also shared a story from earlier today. McCollum, should I stay or should I go? And that's the story. Basically, from I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but a young Vermonter's perspective on whether or not they want to stay here after college. And I actually... Vermont native.
Just graduated from UVM, been a member of their journalism team over there.
Okay, just if you didn't hear Tim, Vermont native, just graduated from UVM and was a member of their journalism team.
She's from Cabot, I think.
Okay, she's from Cabot.
Yeah.
And she's, I remember being in the exact same position. I remember thinking the exact same thing. And here's the story right here. And I remember when I ran for state senate, actually, in 2022, part of my closing statement in the debate that I did against all the other candidates there was basically citing the statistic that Vermont actually exports more young people and college graduates and students than any other state in the country. They refer to it as brain drain, specifically. So,
which it always has. I mean, as in going back 200 years.
That's true.
It always has.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who want to be here, and there are jobs here. There just isn't. Mostly, it's the housing. I think that if you can't get an affordable place to live, like the condos in my neighborhood, the last one sold for $500,000. Are you kidding? We didn't pay that, thank God, when we bought. But it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, and just because it always has been that way doesn't mean it always should be.
Right.
That's the age-old conversation about change, right? Planet Hank also, he just wrote in, he said, and this is in reference to the Hartford, Connecticut female that was arrested. He said, she is a longtime fan, Planet Hank fan. I wonder if I must be kidding. And it's sad because it had taken so long to get justice. So many people get released from jail on different conditions of release. And man, is that ever been the theme in this state.
Like we said earlier in the show, read today's Chronicle about the guy who tried to rape the Essex Junction recreational director who was just walking down a dirt road and gets a deferred sentence from Sarah George.
Oh my God.
And so basically, go and sin no more, Well, 2 months later, he put some duct tape over a woman's mouth in Colchester, and police say slashed her throat.
Jeez.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So this is all Mike Donohue's reporting.
Well,
and that was just one story. Like there was the guy who they just busted down the Barry Montpelier Road, about 3 miles that way from where we are right now. When he was 21, he's 27 now. When he was 21 in Massachusetts, he was already a career criminal who had been in 2 big daylight shootouts. This guy was already a drug trigger man at 21. At 27, police say, he puts a bullet in a guy from St. Johnsbury earlier this month, and they just got him on a warrant yesterday. And so, all these guys just sort of running around who shouldn't be. They should either be in prison or in a good mental health treatment program, like the guy who allegedly slashed the woman's throat was apparently had a lot of mental illness problems.
So just before we end the show today, I just pulled up Rob's his Substack and article, which we repurposed. Thank you, Rob, again for letting us do that. And just pull it up here on the Chronicle. And Rob, if you wouldn't mind, just let everybody know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and how they can support you.
Yeah, they can find me on Substack. The URL is robertroper.substack.com. The name of the column is Behind the Lines, Rob Roper on Vermont Politics. And I have my stuff is like the Chronicle. You don't have to pay to have access to all of the content, but I really appreciate it if you do. It makes it a whole lot easier for me when my wife asked me why I'm spending so much time writing all this stuff. If I can point to
Yes.
some financial benefit to our household for doing so. So it's $5 a month or $50 a year or something like that. It's the cheapest one that Substack allows. So I'm not looking to get rich, but it does help if you support the column.
And it is encouraging, when
course.
people do that. Well, we just spent an hour with the best political columnist in the state of Vermont. Rob, thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, Rob.
Good to
Thanks,
have
Paul.
you here.
It's always fun.
And thank you, Tim, for your contributions. And folks, we'll see you next Friday at 2:30. Hopefully the legislature will no longer be in session and we can give you sort of an overview of what happened. And meanwhile, head on down to Northfield. Check out those yak burgers.
I'll be there, folks.
Sausages. Yeah.
Come on down.
Good weekend, everyone.